of the evolution of bone, which I started drawing as a kid. The first drawing I did of bone was a mess. Let's see, I can get this to work. Yeah, there we go. So this is, Shane mentioned that it was published in over 34 languages. And this is, who's Matt? Oh, it might be, it's not Finnish, it might be, anyway.
Oh, and it's Polish.
It's Polish. This is, the middle one is from Israel, and the one on the right is Russian. And it's all over the world. It's been that way for a long time. But I'm going to now go back to the very first drawing of Folklore. I was asked, I was being interviewed by Scott McCloud, the comics. He's a cartoonist and a cartoonist scholar. He said, the first drawing of Phone Bone, do you still have it? And I said, no, I'm sorry, I don't. But my mother was in the audience that night, and afterwards she said, I have that drawing. It was in the closet. And along with these other drawings from when I was about 10. So there you have Phony Bone and Phone Bone, a little further evolved from that first drawing. And there's Smiley Bone, crashing through the wall, causing chaos, making the diamond fall through the handily open ventilator cover. This is probably the middle school, like 1973 type of a thing. It's Phone Bone's car got a flat tire in front of a haunted house, and a black cat walks in front of him. He has a feeling this is not going to be a very good day. At this point, I'm still under the thrall of Talking Animal comics. I was a real fan of Bugs Bunny and Pogo and all that kind of stuff. I love Peanuts. I was really into that kind of a comic. But shortly after that, a new influence began to pull me in. Like books like Conan and Tarzan, but more importantly, the cover artist Frank Frazetta, with all the drama and the pretty women and the monsters and all that. I just really got into that. At the same time, the summer before my senior year of high school, it was 1977, I read The Lord of the Rings for the first time. Star Wars came out. And most importantly, the very first issue of Heavy Metal came out. Heavy Metal was actually a reprint of, or an Americanized version of, Natal Hurlant, which is a European, French language, self-published by some of the greatest artists in the world, like Mobius and Drouet, and a lot more. This blew my mind. All these blew my mind. The Lord of the Rings blew my mind. Star Wars blew my mind. Heavy Metal. Kind of adult, sexy comics. Nothing like that. I'd never seen anything. Science fiction, fantasy, not pornographic, but just European and sexy. And a new character kind of appeared in my little cartoon universe, if it will. And there she is. This is the very first drawing of the Princess Thorn. She's much sexier here than she ended up later on. But come on, I was only like 15. And she's looking a little bit more like Princess Leia in her slave outfit. But somehow this integrated in my mind to my Phone Bone world. And so this was and the focus of it became Thorn. And Phone Bone was sort of like her Lancelot or something, her hero. A tale of a hero's fight for human freedom and a pretty girl. That was my idea of a Heavy Metal type story. These are all things I found in my mother's attic. This was on the left. It takes a second to look at this because it's kind of not finished. But that's Phone Bone on the left, looking all googly-eyed at the Princess Thorn, and the big fella behind him would become the Great Red Dragon. This is the very first drawing of him. But at this point, he's not quite the same character. He's more like a big beast, a big lumbering beast. I got another hilarious one for you. This is Phone Bone and some unnamed other hero rescuing the Princess Thorn. Again, the Heavy Metal influence of it. Instead of a sword, she has an electric guitar. But this is now the very first drawing I ever did of a rat creature. So in this, I never really got organized enough to actually do anything with this concept. But three very important elements were added to my little bone world, and that was Thorn, the Great Red Dragon, and the rat creatures. Around this time or after that, I met my future wife, Vijaya, who goes by V. She was enrolling in Ohio State, and OSU had a student newspaper, The Lantern, that had a readership of like 50,000. And I approached them, and I thought, well, what if I, tried to do Bone or Thorn? I was calling it Thorn still, as a comic strip. But I tried to make it like a fantasy humor comic strip. And this then was the very first published appearance of Phone Bone and Thorn in the first time it appeared in a Lantern. And it says, hello there. Oops, hi. She says, my name is Thorn. Heart. Are you new around here? Phone Bone, what's yours? And here's that same sequence, almost identically, that from the second issue of Bone, 10 years later. I did that comic strip for 3.5 years, 5 days a week, all year round, throughout the season. And I learned a lot. I figured out a lot of things. I created a lot of characters. In that newspaper strip, I created Grandma Ben. I created Briar. If you haven't read Bone, you don't need to know who that is. But it would go, oh no! What did I do here? I'm so clear. At this point, though, having done that, I fell under another influence, and that was the underground comic book scene. And it was chiefly because of this book, Mouse by Art Spiegelman. It would go on to win a Pulitzer and influence, my entire generation, and probably still does. It was a black and white underground comic, but it meant something. And more importantly, I had really not seen this before. It was a story with a beginning and a middle and an end. Comic books don't do that. I mean, Batman is still 35 or whatever he is. Spider-Man's still a teenager. Even in the movie, Spider-Man's still a teenager. Charlie Brown is still 5 years old. He's never even changed his shirt. This was something new. A beginning and a middle and an end. And I thought, all of a sudden, my heavy metal ideas, everything was working, and I got organized. I actually made a plan. I figured out a story, roughly. Was my big idea, what I always wanted to see when I was a kid, was an Uncle Scrooge story by Carl Barks that was like 1,100 pages long. If you could just get every Carl Barks Walt Disney comics and stories with Donald Duck, put them out, read them from one end to the other, it would make some amazing story. But of course, it didn't really exist. I never found it, so I decided I had to make one. So I came up with a story, I came up with an ending, and I started it. This is a picture of the front cover. I airbrushed it by hand. This was before Photoshop, so you didn't just fly in a logo. You had to make a template, and that would get laid in later by the printer. And the original pages, those pieces of paper are about 17 by 14, and they were 2-ply Bristol. So now my story it's not just this jokey little fish out of water, which is what the comics were. It was now a story that had mystery, it had Lord of the Rings influences, it had the Odyssey, the Iliad and the Odyssey type influences, and of course Moby Dick. So now it's the hard work of selling it. So I started going to comic book shows. This was my very first comic book show. I just had an easel behind me with a drawing, and that's like an original piece of art behind me for the next cover that's coming out. V then joined me, became my full-time partner. She took over the publishing and the licensing, and I made the comics and dealt with the publicity. And she made me paint a big phone book head on her wall, which was actually fun to do. So now there's a little more life to Bone. It's no longer called Thorn. Obviously, the comic book was called Bone. It made more sense, I guess. But it was based on the Hocking Hills, which is about 30 miles south of Columbus, Ohio, where I grew up. And it's a real place called Old Man's Cave. And that actually gave me a real grounding for it. And it wasn't long in the world of comics before I fell in with some bad company. These are the self-publishers. In the front down there, there's Cerebus by Dave Sim, there's Bone by me, and in the back we have, that was James Owen, Martin Wagner, and the wonderful Colleen Doran. And we just met at some of these shows, and we decided to get people's attention, just to get a little interest going. We did print together, and it was huge. We had no idea, because just a few months before this, Image Comics, the Image Comics guys, they were like Marvel's top 6 guys, walked out of Marvel and formed Image Comics, rocked the industry. And when we did this, everybody, all the comics retailers, all the people that read comics, thought we were going to form another Image Comics. And we were mobbed, and we caused problems and crowds everywhere we went. We got kicked out of a couple showrooms because we were blocking DC Comics booth. They complained, we got kicked out, which was really cool because Colleen and Dave said, well, the heck with them. That's not the way they actually said it. Well, good. Let's just tell everybody we're going to be across the hall in the bar. And anybody that comes and talks to us, and anybody who buys us a beer will draw a picture. We empty the show. This is a picture of the self-publishers, mostly. In the back row with my eyes closed, that's me. Next to me is James Owen. In the front is Dave Sim, Colleen, and some young up-and-coming guy named Neil Gaiman. He hung out with us a lot. He hadn't quite become Neil Gaiman yet, but he would very soon. Again, we're just at the shows. It took 12 years to complete Bone. Now this is real trouble right here. So on the left is Jim Valentino, one of the founders of Image Comics, me in the middle, and now he is Neil Gaiman, okay? And at this, if there's ever a picture of disruptors, that's the one. And we had quite an attitude too. So touring and going to shows, we did a fantasy show one time where we built Stonehenge out of styrofoam and a giant tree with Charles Vess and Linda Medley, and we toured across America for a month. I believe that was the first time anybody had really done anything that ridiculous as a comic book. In the end, after 12 years, I collected Bone in a giant 1,300-page paperback. We flew it into San Diego, and it cost a lot of money to send in like 2 pallets of 4-pound books. And we were very nervous because as we were setting up, we thought, we're going to go broke sending these all back home because we didn't even know if anybody would buy something like this. And thank goodness we had a hardcover edition that was sold out on the second day of the show, and we sold almost all of these out by the end of the show. And I'm talking about San Diego, the big Comic-Con, which led to a lot of fun rumors. Everybody thought the entire print run was sold out and that they wouldn't get any of their stores. Meanwhile, I did not know this, but the libraries were starting to carry Bone. We had the collected editions. They had spines, and it was, they said it's from 8 to 80, can enjoy it, and they started shelving it. And I was invited along with Art Spiegelman, Neil Gaiman, and Colleen Doran to speak to the ALA's pre-conference, which is an important launch to the ALA festival. It's always about what everybody's thinking about that year. And that year, they were thinking about graphic novels. And they asked me to do a little slide to be up on this giant screen wall on the opening event when all the librarians came and sat down. And I can't read it from here, but it says, what does it say? Oh, wait, I can read it. Right here.
You are clever.
See how clever I am? Hello, librarians. I'm here to say that comics are literature. No. We do not use contractions here. Why not? Because everyone knows librarians only use proper English. Now say and. Comics and literature. Hacha. Enjoy the conference, everybody. And the conference was a huge success. We thought, I remember huddling together with Neil and Colleen and Art Spiegel, and go, we got to talk to these librarians, we got to convince them that comics is reading, but they already knew that. We didn't have to convince them of anything. And this event was considered the tipping point of the acceptance of graphic novels, and all graphic novel sales just kind of went up, and librarians all over the country started ordering them. And the librarians also called Scholastic and said, you need to publish BONE. So we then got a call from Scholastic, who told us that, we want to launch a brand new imprint that's a graphic novels for young audiences. It'll be the first mainstream imprint like that. And we want to launch it with BONE. And we decided to colorize the books so that it would be different from the ones that my wife and I have been publishing for 12 years. And it took us about 5 years, but we colored them, and there were 9 books. We put out 2 a year, and it was a big success. Let me just say that. And it introduced a whole new generation of Vermonters to me. This is supposed to represent kids and getting their books out for me. And I was afraid at first, am I just, is it going to be weird? Are the adult people that have been getting my books signed for years not going to come see me anymore? Not a problem. Anywhere I go, there's a mix of adults and children all enjoying the books. And we must be on like 3rd, maybe 4th generation of kids now. Scholastic has it. And this is my new gang of troublemakers. That's Kazuki Buishi, who does Amulet. And in the middle is Raina Telgemeier, who did Smile and Drama. So this is the evolution of BONE. I showed you the evolution of BONE as a drawing. This is the evolution of BONE as a publication. Starting on the far bottom left, that's BONE #1, the first comic book. 1993, I collected the first 6 issues, so that was the first graphic novel of BONE. And then the 1-volume edition, which is the whole story, which I believe we have some over here for sale. And then the Scholastic version, which is, that's the most popular one of all, of course. So I'm happy to say that there is a new book coming in September. It's a sequel to Tall Tales. It's called More Tall Tales. It has a lot of BONE art featuring the cousins by me, written by me. But it also has a few other stories written by Tom Stengowski and drawn by a few other people, among them Matt Smith and Scotty Brown. Is that right? And those are really nice. This is something people have been talking to me about for years, and I've never entertained it. But we're going to do a Kickstarter this summer in July. A very deluxe edition. It's going to reprint the entire run of the comic strips, 3.5 years of Thorn, with a lot of back material. There's a guy from Germany who is writing an academic. He went through every single page of the Lantern, looking at all, not just my strip, but other strips. It's going to be really in-depth. And as one of the stretch goals in Kickstarter, some of those early comics that I showed where the black cat was walking in front of Homo, we're going to reprint little facsimiles of those whole comics and put them in little slots in the back. And those will come with it. I think this is going to be really fun. I'm still horrified by the drawings, and I'm just facing the music, and I'm just going to try to cash in on this. And now this is my current project, and this is where all my passion is now. Of course I love BONE, but I have to move on. So this is going to be a 6-volume series. The first 2 are out, and it's called Tuki. And I don't have a good quick elevator pitch, but I'm going to try. It takes place 2 million years ago when more than one human species existed at the same time, but only one could control fire. And that was our direct ancestor, Homo erectus. And that's actually true. I don't know why nobody's ever done a story about this before, because think about that. Lucy, the famous Lucy, Australopithecus. Australopithecines were still alive in East Africa 2 million years ago. So was Homo habilis, the tool maker, the first real big tool maker. and the first to be classified as human. Still alive 2 million years ago. And there's basically like 8 other ones, Paranthropus bosi, and I don't have the list memorized, but there's like a bunch of them. But Homo erectus, our direct ancestor, shows up 2 million years ago, out of nowhere, not only can make fire, but eats cooked food, which completely transforms the human form, makes us slender. We are walking more, we're sweating and losing our hair, and we are almost recognizably us 2 million years ago. And when you look at skulls, sorry, I'm starting to get into the weeds, but sorry, I get excited about this. When you look at skulls from our ancestors back in that time period, there is, on the bottom of the skull, there is a voice box, a larynx that's long enough to modulate sound, and casts from inside the skull in the front show Broca's areas, which is a very important part of the brain that we use in speech. So we don't know if they could speak or if it was anything like what we could recognize now. But they were certainly the first ones to have the equipment. So of course in my book they will speak. I just have a few pages here just to let you take a look at it. And right here is a good example of some of the different human species. The little guy is based on the Australopithecines. That's a Lucy species, although he's a slightly newer model, Australopithecine afarensis. Yeah, that's right. And then Tuki is the guy who's running. He's the star. He's kind of like a Clint Eastwood loner, but he quickly picks up this mismatched group of outcasts. The hairy one is a Homo habilis, and they are terrified of fire. And so all other species in my story are terrified of fire. They believe it belongs to the gods. In fact, they think it's taboo. And most of the other species hunt anyone who's found using fire and kills them, because clearly that's dangerous and unnatural. But these are all outcasts who quickly realize that Tuki it's quite safe to be around Tuki. He's pretty clever and he can keep them safe. And he doesn't really want to hang around with them, but he can't get rid of them. So in this case, to the younger, the children that you saw, they're also Homo erectus. But they were 2 of them were kidnapped by habilis, which they call habos, and he's gone after them here, and it's just a kind of quick Tarzan type of a rescue operation. There's the habos with the kidnapped children, but Tuki's about to lay down the law. The very idea for Tuki came from a trip I took in 1995. We really tried to go fast through this. That's me and my wife and a cartoonist friend of mine, Larry Marker, and his wife Corey. She did work with Abercrombie in Kent and would go to Africa, and animals were her passion. So one time they talked us into going to the national parks in Kenya and Tanzania, and we went to see the animals, and it was mind-blowing. This is 1995. I'm in the middle of BONE. I'm just doing this, just for fun to see what it's like. I had no idea I was going to end up doing anything with it, but halfway between the Serengeti and I can't remember. We were going between 2 different parks in between Kenya and now I'm getting goofed up. Tanzania. There's the Olduvai Gorge. That's where the Leakeys did their archaeology and found multiple human species going back millions of years. All of evolution was lined up right there. And that blew my mind. And this plaque is where they found Paranthropus bosi skull. That's like an Australopithecine. And I stood there, and I have to say it was a vision. I remember looking up and seeing those trees up there, like they're more palm trees. They're like swaying. And I remember a vision of all the different human species, the Australopithecines, the Homo erectus, the Homo habilis, all of them, all alive at the same time, mingling with each other, almost like they're at a farmer's market or something, okay? And it was almost like a dream, but I was very moved by that image, and I didn't quite understand it, but I never forgot it. And even though I idea that I was ever going to do a story like this, I started taking pictures, just in case. And every one of these pictures I'm showing you, if you read the book, you're going to see stuff like it, including this baby. This guy was right next to it. We didn't even see him, but he was right next to our Jeep. It was a female lioness. But she was looking at us. Kind of good show. Just looking at that. Okay, to end with one little quick story. This is me and Larry, and I wanted to share with you some wisdom that I learned from a very stubborn baboon. We would go out each day and we'd come back in at night to a hotel. But when we come into a hotel, it's not like you're going back to the Hilton. There's like a hotel they built out there, and there's no roads to it or anything, or fences. There's just like a couple of guys walking around with rifles. And we would go out in the day, and one day we went out and they gave us little paper bags with a lunch in it. And we sat and we had our lunch. And then afterwards we built a little fire to burn our refuge because you can't leave anything out there. So we built a little fire, everybody threw their paper bags in it. Some of them had bananas in them still. And these two baboons came in, and they said, the little balloon, I keep saying balloon, the little baboon kept running into the fire and coming out with a smoking hot banana, and the big baboon would take from. And it happened over and over again. And we're like, well, I actually thought that was a real good metaphor or analogy for Hollywood. But anyway, it got up to about five of these, and then the little baboon gave up. Or maybe the big guy let him have one, I don't remember. But the baboon, the big baboon, was just sitting there. He was just sitting on the rubbish pile, the rubbish pit. And we're all like it's almost as close as it looks like we are, right? So everybody kind of wants a picture of him, right? So everybody's going, hey, come on, turn around. And he's just not having, he does not care. He's obviously done this before. He's eating his bananas, and everybody's making noises. And then finally I went, Larry turned to me and chuckled, and he says, fart humor goes way back. All right, well, thank you very much for that, for waiting for so long for that little presentation. These are all the books I've done. I skipped RASL in this just to save a little time. But now I think we're going to skip any questions or anything, because I was talking to you guys all when we go through, okay? So how would we like to do this?
Sure. Questions or?
Do you want to do questions? How much time do we have?
We've got a while.
Oh, well, all right. Would anybody like to ask a question? Let's start with that. Yes.
So the first two Tuki books were Kickstarter. Are you planning on doing Kickstarters for the other four?
I do. It was really successful. And we were originally going to do it, the same way we've always done it, offer to the distributors, put it in their catalog and see what they do. But now the problem is there's only one distributor left, and that distributor's name is Diamond. Has always been really good for us, but they're struggling, and they didn't really want to take a risk on it, and they weren't going to really order too many. So at the same time, some friends of mine who I knew from the self-publishing days said, try Kickstarter. They talked me into it, and it blew up. I mean, we did it, we launched it, and we what do you call it? We got our funding like in 9 minutes. We were quite happy with that, and it was we sold way more books than Diamond had even dreamed that we would sell. So yeah, we're going to do it now. That doesn't mean we don't want to sell them to comic book stores. We want them to. We make a special section. We're trying to make sure comic store owners know that when they go into Kickstarter, they can get it for the same price that they would from a distributor. It's there. They can get it, and then afterwards we'll dump them back into the system. Dump them sounds bad. We'll on-ramp them back into the system. Yes.
Did you do the same thing for Tuki as you did for Bone, and that you drew the last page at the very beginning?
It sort of. I didn't quite do it as I was much more organized with Bone. I finished RASL and I jumped right into Tuki. I thought I knew what the story was. I thought I knew what everything was. But once I got into it, it is when the little kids entered the scene and he couldn't get rid of them. I went, oh, I know what the story is now, and I need to start over. So, and I had been doing it as a webcomic. So there wasn't like any physical books that existed or anything. Although I did reprint them in comics, but they didn't really amount to much. So the good news is, it is still the same ending. I've restructured getting to it. Yes, sir.
I was actually gonna ask, what prompted you to go landscape format for Tuki? Was that a holdover from the webcomic, or just an interest? I'm not a big fan. You're like Walt Kelly and everything.
Yeah.
You just felt it was like better for the story, or?
It was mostly a hangover. Is that right? Or a holdover from the hangover was a good slip from the webcomic. I wanted to. Screens are usually shaped, like TVs now. So I wanted to go to landscape to fill the screen. I thought that was natural. And when I went from the newspaper strip to comic book, I had to learn a new format, size, and those things they lend themselves to different kinds of storytelling and pacing. Same thing when I went from BONE to RASL, which I didn't really show any examples of here, but I did a completely different kind of, almost every panel. So there might be 3 or 4 panels on a page, but they went all the way across. So they were little landscapes things. I like to try different things every time. Because I had like 80 pages that I had really drawn my ass off on for the webcomic, I didn't want to redraw them. So I just wanted to augment them and tweak them and add pages in between and make new stories. So I was kind of stuck with the landscape. However, it again opened itself up to me, and suddenly I am on the African savannas and I'm in Old Divide Gorge, and I've got these giant vistas, and it feels very right for the story. And I quickly became aware of that and used that intentionally. That was probably too honest of an answer. Yes, John.
Thank you. So are the pages physically bigger as well? I mean, is the board you draw on bigger?
They're actually the same size. They're
Same size.
just size. So they're probably about that big, and the live area is probably that big. But going that way, I had to figure out some new panel layouts and stuff, and I really overthought it at first. But it ended up being I liked it. I'm comfortable. I think you had your hand up there.
I'm curious, was coming off of BONE going into RASL, was it a conscientious decision to make something a little more grown up to kind of show people something different?
No, but I understand that question because it's, first of all, BONE is considered a children's book, and second because there's some boobs in it, but not a lot. The BONE was not originally meant to be a children's book. When I started in the comic book industry in 1991, there were very few children, almost none, and even fewer women reading comics. There were women reading comics, and there were children reading comics, but it was basically grown men had kind of taken over the industry, like me. They were all me, and so that's what I was drawing the comic for. And I figured I wanted to draw that comic that I told you about when I wanted when I was a little kid. That Uncle Scrooge that went from the beginning to the end in an epic scale. And I never found an epic scale comic like that with a beginning, middle, and end. So I drew it myself. But I'm an adult now, so I had to make it so I enjoyed it. So it was really just supposed to be inspired by a children's book. And because I had this idea that my goal was not to not swear, but to just sit, whatever could be in the newspaper, that was my rule. If it could be in Dick Tracy or in Pogo or in Peanuts, then it can be in my book, and that was it. So does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Cool. And also, I just like noir and science fiction, so.
I figured it was a lot of like pulling from all these. You mentioned all your influences.
Yeah, the term that's used nowadays is mashup, but I didn't know what that was. I'm just a trash picker. Yes. Oh wait, you were next.
Oh yeah, the fire from the gods aspect. Is it something of your invention, or did they think that there was around back then that these different species?
That is pretty much my invention, because there's really no evidence. They've not actually found fire from that far back in time. I think the earliest evidence they found of like actual ash or of evidence of fossilized fire sites only goes back a couple 100,000 years maybe. But with DNA and genetics and looking at the bodies, our bodies, we know when we went from having a big gut like a gorilla, which most of our earlier ancestors had, to eating cooked foods which we could absorb nutrients much more easily, and you can use that takes up a lot less real estate in intestines. So they could see the skeletal changes, and they could look at, we know when we lost hair because the lice down here are different from the lice up here. And that happened 2 million years ago, because all of a sudden there was this big break in the highway. And so we know that when the head lice appeared 2 million years ago, that's when we lost our hair. So exactly why that is, there's theories that's mostly to do with like, we're now upright, we're running around, it's more efficient to sweat than to pant, things like that. That's how they measure things now back in time, as opposed to only being able to find the bones. Yes.
So among your workload, SHAZAM really sticks out. What was the draw to do something with Big Two, and why was it SHAZAM?
I got a call. I think most of the comic book industry, the world, all my friends and the people that work in it, knew I was getting towards the end. It was news. Bone's going to end after 12 years. And I don't think people really believed me that it was one single story. And they were shocked. But I got a call from DC Comics. I came back to my desk one day. Kathleen had taken a message and left it on my desk. And it said, it was a note from Mike Carlin, who was the editor-in-chief of DC Comics. And the message was, would you be interested in doing a superhero comic? And I was like, I never really thought about it, but obviously I'm going to call him back, right? And I said, well, what superhero were you thinking about? And he said, SHAZAM, Captain Marvel. And I went, oh. I mean, if he said Flash or Green Lantern, I don't care about that kind of stuff. I mean, maybe Batman and Superman, but Batman and Superman had done so well, I got really nothing I felt like it. Captain Marvel, SHAZAM, that's a comic that's relatively untouched since the golden age of comics. And it involves mythology. We know all the power, the speed of Mercury, and the strength of Hercules, all that stuff. Magic words, you know, SHAZAM, and a talking tiger. Come on. I'm in. So I thought that was good. But I think to answer what you're really asking is, I finished Bone, and it was exhausting. I mean, I didn't even realize at the time how emotionally difficult it was to let go of Bone, because to put it simply, it had a big shadow, and I was quite happy to play with someone else, just a one-off deal. I did like a 4-issue miniseries, retold, because they wanted me to relaunch it. They said, we want you to start Captain Marvel over from the beginning with your style and do it. Unfortunately, before it finished, there was a big shakeup at DC, and new people came in, and mine just became almost like a one-off story. It was not canon anymore. But I was quite happy to take a break and not create something new, because anything I did after Bone was never going to reach those heights. Bone was just lightning in a bottle. A lot of it was luck. A lot of it was just the timing. And I was on fire. I can't even explain it. I read stuff and I go, I don't think I could write that. No, I'm not that clever. It just everything came together. So I was quite happy to do SHAZAM, take a break. I came back to RASL. I'm very proud of RASL. I think it's a good job. It's the Maltese Falcon meets Blade Runner meets the Spider-Verse. Although about 10 years before the Spider-Verse. But it did, as I knew, it did not get the traction it did. Of course it would, nothing would. But Tuki is starting to. The first book's been out for years, it's third printing. The second book's in its second printing. And I'm working on the third book now. It should be six issues, I think I said that earlier. All right, should we do a couple more questions, all right. Yes.
I'm in the process of trying to start my own comic company so I can self-publish. Do you have any tips?
Oh, I have a lot of tips. First, don't. No, I'm kidding. No, it's too late. No, it's actually, it's the best thing. And it is not for the weak. It's a lot of work. Even if you're successful, there are people who throw obstacles in your way. And so just mentally prepare yourself. Be sure you like the comics you do. Are you publishing any other people's or just for yourself?
Just for myself.
Okay, well, make sure this is a book you feel solid about. You're gonna spend a lot of time, it takes a long time to make a comic. You have to dream it up, you have to write it down, you have to draw it, you have to ink it. So you've done it, you have to letter it. I mean, you've gone over the story like 4 or 5 times before you get done. So you gotta like the story and really be into it and believe in it. And it's quite a commitment. So when people naysay you or don't show interest, as long as you're happy, And then the industry's changed so much since I did it over 30 years ago. But what I did was I had my story clear. I had my partner, my wife, V, who, I could bounce that story out. So we felt confident about it. And I read every single trade journal I could find. At the time, it was the Comics Journal, it was the Comics Buyer's Guide, there was Comics Seed, there were books out of the UK, there were magazines out of the UK. Almost, except for the Comics Journal, those are almost all gone. And now it's all online. You need to find podcasts that tell you. So podcasts, these people, they'll interview cartoonists, they'll interview editors, and you can learn the industry by that. Podcasts. Website's a thing anymore, I don't know. But you know what I mean. It's all the stuff I read is magazines you can find online. And you can find out what shows exist. I didn't know when I started out that there was a show in San Diego, the Comic-Con International. I didn't know. In 1991 or 92, the first year I went, it was like 35,000 people, which we thought was a heck of a lot. We hadn't seen nothing yet. It's like 150,000 people now. It's a huge show. But you'll find out where to go. You'll want to go to CXE, which is a show I developed in Columbus, Ohio. You'll want to go to SPX. You'll want to go to TCAF in Toronto. SPX is in Bethesda, Maryland, outside of Washington, D.C. You might want to save your money up for San Diego and get your feet wet first. The others are a little more affordable, but those are all focused on comics as authors, comics as creators. Oh, and here's County Charlotte, excuse me, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going there.
It's
I'm
great.
coming there this year.
I'll see it there.
Yeah. And, yes, and Charlotte also has a huge independent section. It's almost as big as the regular section, isn't it? Yeah, that's a good show. So, you'll want to go to these shows and meet other people like yourself, see what they're doing, see where your stuff fits kind of in the atmosphere. And other than that, just keep your eyes open. All right? Well, that made a lot of questions coming right in the back.
We were late, so apologies if you already covered this, but Netflix was developing a cartoon. What happened with that? I saw the development was canceled maybe 2 years ago.
I don't talk about that. I can't.
It actually came up in my Facebook memories like.
No, it's I choked on that when I made that joke. Yeah, Bone has a long history of not being made into a movie. It was first option by Nickelodeon and Paramount in 1998. That didn't go anywhere famously because they signed something saying they wouldn't put a song in it. Because at that time, that was when, every animated movie had terrible, some of the Disney songs were good, but there is really terrible songs. I guess they thought they had to. And I was like, can't put his music. And then first thing they did is turn around and say, we want to put, Britney Spears and New Kids on the Block as songs in the body of the film. So that didn't work out. And then I got optioned by, we talked with Sony, eventually it ended up at Warner Brothers. But Warner Brothers, I won't go into details, but the executives got involved and the things got very complicated. They wanted to do terrible things to Bone, and I was just not having it. So get this, they purchased the option, bought the rights out from under me, which basically backed the dump truck full of money up to my house, but kicked me out of it, and in essence, put it on the shelf for like 8 years. And at that point, the rights reverted to me, but all that, everything they spent, not only on me, but on every single thing, it was a total of 10 years, that they spent on development and writers who were, getting paid in $150,000 cracks. And so I had the rights back, but I didn't have the money to pay it back, to buy it back, until Netflix swooped in and they paid it, and now Netflix owns it. And then as soon as that was announced, COVID hit, and we didn't do anything for a year. And so we figured out, this lockdown thing is not going to be over in summer. So we all learned how to do Zoom, just like everybody did. But before we got very far at all, the Netflix had its own problems that we all know about now. They were losing stock, they were losing subscribers, they kicked out all the executives and brought new ones in, and they pretty much just shut down everything that was only so far into production, regardless. And we were one of them. And so it hurt, but the only upside was when that was announced. My wife wakes me up, and she was looking at her computer, and she goes, "We're trending." And I go, "Wow." She shows me this BONE, 70K. 70,000. I mean, most stuff trends with like 5,000. I mean, 70,000. And then we're trending. And then we look to see why we're trending. Netflix canceled us. So, like I said, the only upside of that was that the story was not about canceling BONE. It was about Netflix's problems and many things. But every online service, it was a picture about BONE and a headline about Netflix canceled BONE. And we got flooded with other streaming services that wanted to do it. So hope is not lost, but I'm never going to get very excited. That's for sure. That was a long answer, I'm sorry. In the very back.
So if there were a studio that were to do like a TV show or a movie for BONE, what would you say is like the one absolute thing that they have to follow, or like the one criteria that they do not want to break in order for it to be a
Well, the one thing that seemed to be the problem, because no one got involved with BONE, any studio. None of them didn't want to make BONE. No one wanted to make a bad movie. But there were real hang-ups over, it always came down to this, that we would start with the producer. We're going, yeah, this is the Lord of the Rings of animation. We're going to make that. We're going to do 3 animated movies. And then the executives get involved and they're like, no, we're going to do the whole thing in a 90-minute children's animation. And we're like, oh, we can't. Oh, yes, we are. And then we would spend, a year or two just wasting time trying to make that work. So that's the first thing. Oh, and I actually do know how to do that. I've told every executive all the way back to, well, not quite Nickelodeon, but everyone after that. I know exactly how to do it. I know how to break it up into 3 movies, do the first one. It'll feel like its own movie. But then we'll be able to pick up and do if it's successful, we'll do the others. No one ever let me. So that's the first thing. If it's ever done again, I'll decide how to do it. We're gonna do it my way this time. It was V who said this. Because I was starting to get a little depressed. And she goes, no, we're gonna do it. She goes, your books are unpublishable. They're only successful because we actually publish them and put them out. It's gonna be the same with this. You just have to do it yourself. And so she started organizing it, and we're seeing what can be put together. So we'll see. Yes, sir.
Was plotting out BONE, RASL, Tuki, SHAZAM, what was your process for plotting out the story, especially for the longer stories? Like, how did you go about going A, B, C, D?
It's usually, okay, so somewhere in the process bubbles up an image, an idea. I think with RASL, it doesn't necessarily make it into the final thing. But I had this idea of parallel universes. What if you accidentally fell into one and nobody believed you that you were, and there was a me in that universe, but I became that person. And now I'm in that universe, but nobody believes me. And I'm like, I go up to Kathleen and I say, Kathleen, it's me. Something's wrong. And she's like, I don't know you. I'm just a student at Ohio State and I've never met you. And then my next thought was like, well, what if you find out your wife is married to someone else? And I was thinking, okay, now I'm interested. This is kind of like or maybe you're married to somebody else. I'm like, now there's something going. RASL has nothing to do with any of that. But that was what got me going on the idea. The only thing that survived that is that RASL could go into other universes, which are only slightly different. They're all right here happening at the same time, just the slightest difference away from us. If you could just pierce that tiny veil. And I also did a buttload of, can I say buttload? I did a shit ton of research into string theory and earmuffs. No, you're too old for that. Oh, there's an earmuff over there, sorry.
In the Navy, he started all.
Okay. I did a lot of research into string theory, into membrane theory. M theory, it stands for membrane or mysterious. And there are some cool things. I won't go into it because it's just like Tuki. I'm going to go too far. I can tell you too much. Like Moby Dick, you're always snoozing. So basically, you start working from that. Now I'm interested. I had some visuals of a little guy with giant engines. The idea being he's got the most advanced technology on the earth, but he's using this really archaic giant junk built in his garage. And then I started, what was the story? How am I going to build the story on? Sometimes like Bone is kind of like, it's like equal parts Lord of the Ring and equal parts like the Odyssey. Not that I was trying to copy moments or anything, but RASL's sort of like the Maltese Falcon. And I mentioned it earlier, a little bit of hard science, parallel universes, Spider-Verse. I didn't, like I said, I was before the Spider-Verse. Basically, then you just have to start. You've got your characters. You learn about Noir. You need a femme fatale. You need an antagonist. I came up with them, and again, I want to have an ending, and I couldn't come up with one. I thought about a lot of other details in between, what the story was. Oh, crucial. I was talking about parallel universes and weirdnesses with a friend of mine, an artist friend, and she said, you need to look up the Philadelphia experiment and Nikola Tesla. And this was, I don't know, early 2000s, and of course, people know who Tesla is, and people did back then, but not the way they do now. And I was like going down this Tesla rabbit hole, and I'm like, what? And in real life, this is real, a lot of his papers disappeared after he died, mysteriously, the night before he was supposed to have a meeting at the White House during World War II. And the government went into his quarters, took all his papers. They returned some of them, but a bunch are missing. And I go, I have my Maltese Falcon. Tesla's missing journals. I go, boom. So, I'm just looking for things like that. Probably, again, I'm getting too much into the weeds. So, but to finish this book, I needed the ending. And I know enough about Noir. There's a couple of rules. It's usually about a maze, or it ends up being a man trapped in his own web. So I came up, I actually am wearing this necklace called the Man in the Maze. It's an Indian, a lot of the Indians in the Southwest use this symbol. It's a man who travels in a maze, and that gave me my maze, it gave me my web, and of course the web of going to different parallel worlds. He's lost in this confusing trap that he's built of himself. But in the end, it has to be, it's just by your own guts, your own wits, that you figure it out and outsmart the people who are trying to stop you. And I decided that was going to happen in the Sonoran Desert, because I wanted to draw all those cactus, Auhor cactus. So I spent a week out in the, I didn't go out there to like a camp, but I stayed with my brother-in-law in Tucson. I went way out in the desert every day until about the third day, the whole ending I got it, wrote it down, and that was it. So then it was like 2 years of research, the string theory, FM theory, and Einstein, and the war between Tesla and Edison, and all that, and making it work in parallel with the story. It's easy, you can do it.
All right, I think we should move on to the signing.
All right,
And
all right.
I'm gonna have Kathleen draw another couple of door prizes.
Okay, once you get ready, and we'll take one more